Angelia Joy Hilbert was born in 1966 in Texas and went by Angie. Her parents, Reverend John, who was a pastor in Owensboro, Kentucky, and Joyce Spalding were foster parents, caring for about 25 children over the years. At the age of 19, Angie married John T. Hilbert, and a year later, she gave birth to a baby girl named Alyssa Mae Hilbert. By the age of 22, Angie was working at the Gulf Service Station located at the intersection of Bardstown Road and Hurstbourne Lane in Louisville. In early May 1989, she filed for divorce from John, and then a month later, she strangely went missing. On June 3, 1989, after leaving work at midnight, she was seen in the Strunk Ridge Road area where her parents lived. She and her parents were both planning to move to Owensboro, with her parents already in the process, and Angie was soon to follow. That night, she was in contact with John and was even seen with him. After that, nothing. It's like she vanished into thin air. Unfortunately, she wasn't reported missing until 13 days later. When she was last seen, she was wearing blue jeans, an orange shirt, and a distinctive class ring that belonged to an unknown male. 3 weeks later, on June 26, 1989, her 1982 gray four-door Pontiac J2000 was found in the parking lot of Toy Tiger Lounge on Bardstown Road. Investigators believe the person or persons involved in her disappearance likely drove the car to that location. After she went missing, her parents were quickly granted temporary custody of Alyssa and then later permanent custody. If Angie were murdered, it would actually be a double homicide because she was 3 months pregnant. Did her pregnancy and the class ring she was wearing have something to do with her disappearance? It's very possible because John was known for being a jealous individual and was very angry that she was moving away with their child. Years later, in 1992, tips from an anonymous source led authorities to search a nursery in Jefferson County with a bulldozer and canine. 2 locations were searched, one on a hill and the other down a slope about 300 yards apart. While the dogs showed a couple of strong indications of decomposing human remains, nothing was found. However, investigators believe the clay-like soil in the area could have masked the odor of a decomposing body, making it almost impossible to pinpoint the exact spot. 10 years after her disappearance, in 1999, while at his estranged girlfriend Karen Poole's trailer, also known as Karen Miller, John shot and killed 2 men, 28-year-old Danny Wayne Elmore and 30-year-old Joe Eddie Stump, who were cousins. That night, John, Karen, and Karen's sister, Tammy Patterson, who also lived there, went to a bar in Louisville called Jughead's. While there, John reportedly didn't drink because he had volunteered to be the designated driver. Although Karen and John had broken up, she wanted to remain friends, despite later admitting that people had told her to always keep an eye on him if she was going to keep him around. This was even after he had shot his gun into the trunk of her car in front of her children because she threatened to break up with him. While at the bar, Karen and Tammy met Danny and Joe, and around 11 p.m., the group of 5 went to the women's trailer to continue to party. John told the police that Danny and Joe grabbed him, slammed him into a wall, shoved him out the door, and he flipped out, pulled a gun from his jacket, and shot them in self-defense. However, Karen and Tammy disputed this, saying they never saw an assault on John from the men. They recalled that John entered the trailer and immediately shot Joe. As John was fleeing the scene, Karen, who said she never feared John, ran out of the trailer after him and found Danny dead on the front porch steps from a close-range gunshot. John was quickly arrested because after he fled, he crashed his truck into a utility pole about 4 miles away. In 2001, he was found guilty of both murders and sentenced to death. However, in a shocking turn of events, his conviction was overturned in 2005, but he remained in jail awaiting retrial. 3 years later, the Kentucky Supreme Court ruled that prosecutors could seek the death penalty, which they did during the retrial. In 2011, he was found guilty once again, but wasn't sentenced to death. This time, he received 27 years for Joe's murder and life with the possibility of parole after 25 years for Danny's murder. Sadly, Angie has never been located. If you knew her during the spring of 1989, especially those who were aware of her pregnancy, please call the Louisville Metro Police's tip line at 502-574-5673. Angelia Joy Hilbert went missing on June 3, 1989, and as of October 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved. Crystal Sue Marler was born on November 28, 1982. At the age of 15, she lived on Ross Howard Road in Whitley, Kentucky, and was a student at McCrary Central High School, where her friends described her as a sweet and quiet girl. Sadly, she would never make it to her upcoming 16th birthday. On October 8, 1998, around 4 or 5 p.m., her mother dropped her off near a friend's house on Strunk Ridge Road in Whitley City. After that, she was never seen alive again. While some reports state that she may have briefly returned home before disappearing, that hasn't been widely corroborated. After Crystal's disappearance, authorities initially listed her as a runaway, with some believing she ran away with friends or a boyfriend. Others suspected far worse, and their suspicions would prove true on April 25, 2009, when a turkey hunter found her skeletal remains in the woods off Peel Dogwood Road, a remote Forest Service road just off Kentucky 700. This location is at the edge of the Daniel Boone National Forest, a desolate place with no houses within 10 miles. The remains were located about 10 feet from a gravel road, scattered on the surface under years of leaves. The hunter who found them initially thought they were animal bones, before discovering her skull. 3 months later, in July of 2009, a state medical examiner confirmed the identification. An autopsy discovered she had died from blunt force trauma and a gunshot wound. Sadly, not long before her remains were found, her mother, Florence Abigail Marler, died in a car accident. Police reviewed her mother's journal notes and found she suspected longtime friends of being involved in her daughter's disappearance, not a boyfriend. Unfortunately, there are not many details in the case, and investigators, along with her family, are desperate for answers. If you know anything, even the smallest detail, about Crystal's murder, please contact the McCreary County Sheriff's Office at 606-376-2322 immediately. You can also call Kentucky State Police Post 11 in London, Kentucky at 606-878-6622. Glinver Keith Osborne, who went by Glen, was born on May 6, 1938, to Carl and Helen. In 1955, he married Mary Ruth Johnson, and 11 years later, sadly, became a widower. He never remarried and spent most of his life in Michigan, where he worked at the Ford Motor Company. After retirement, he moved down to Virgie, Kentucky, hoping for a quieter life in the Appalachian foothills. By 2006, 67-year-old Glen was still sharp, independent, and quite active, even while managing diabetes, which meant he needed daily insulin and medication. He never went anywhere without it. On the morning of March 2, 2006, Glen called his daughter Gina around 11 a.m. He mentioned withdrawing money from the bank and going to a land auction near Johns Creek. He had a $20,000 cashier's check with him and likely a good bit of physical cash as well. Witnesses later stated that they saw Glen at the Weddington Plaza in Coal Run on the same day, but after that, nothing. 3 days later, on March 5th, when no one had heard from Glen, his family reported him missing. The next day, his Ford F-150 was found abandoned in the same plaza parking lot where he was last seen. Authorities don't believe he drove the truck there himself. A friend claimed he picked Glen up from the plaza and drove him to meet someone, but said he didn't know who he was meeting. However, that friend's story strangely shifted multiple times, and eventually he stopped cooperating with investigators altogether. Despite searches, interviews, and suspicions, Glen's disappearance remains a mystery. If you worked at or visited Weddington Plaza anytime between March 2nd and March 6, 2006, or if you were involved with Johns Creek land auctions that day, please contact Kentucky State Police Post 9 at 606-433-7711. Even a small detail could matter, such as a person who might have offered him a ride that day, or you heard someone discussing his $20,000 cashier's check. His mother lived to the age of 98 and spent the last 14 years of her life not knowing what happened to her son. Glinver Keith Osborne disappeared on March 2, 2006, and as of October 2025, he remains missing, and this case remains unsolved. Jessie Marie Twilight Song Crooks, who went by Twilight, was born on October 22, 1985. She was originally from Santa Fe, New Mexico, but at some point moved to the Plano area outside of Bowling Green, Kentucky. Her mother's side connected her to the Arapaho tribe, while her father's side traced back to the Cherokee people. She was known for her love of Arapaho traditions and for crafting beautiful beadwork. She often created intricate, beautiful pieces as gifts for her friends and family. At age 15, she was a straight-A student at Greenwood High School who had dreams of attending Harvard. She lived with her father, Bobby, her brother, and stepmother, Linda, in a subdivision on Lorman Mill Road. She also worked as a cashier at Dimer's store and was often described as a bubbly and energetic individual who had a contagious smile and also enjoyed swimming and playing soccer. On August 28, 2001, she spent the day with several friends, first having dinner with them, and then hanging out and listening to music. After returning home, Twilight took a shower and told her dad and stepmom Linda good night. But about an hour later, at 10:52 p.m., someone called the house phone and Twilight answered it. Police later traced the call to a payphone outside the Plano Country Store. Her parents were unaware that Twilight often snuck out, but she typically stayed close to the home. Investigators believe that after receiving the call that night, that's exactly what she did. Sadly, she would never return home and was never seen alive again. When her father checked on her the next morning at around 6 a.m., he found her bed empty and immediately called the police. He also began calling her friends, and that's when he learned about her habit of sneaking out. After 2 weeks of constant searching, panic turned to heartache. On September 10th, a man walking his dog near Matlock Old Union Road, about 5 miles from her home, was alerted by his dog off the trail to something that made the dog go crazy about 100 feet down the tree line on an embankment. He went to see what it was and shockingly found Twilight's remains. It was clear to investigators that whoever murdered her had tried to conceal the body with twigs and grass. The next day, the identification was confirmed through dental records. Unfortunately, that same day, the events of 9/11 occurred in New York City, overshadowing her case. Investigators ruled her death a homicide, but even as of 2025, her cause of death has never been released to the public. In the early 2000s, investigators lacked tools like cell phones and advanced DNA testing, making the case difficult to solve. Also, her purple fossil watch has never been located. They've interviewed over 100 people in this case, but they were never able to pinpoint a solid suspect. They do at least have the killer's DNA, and it's been uploaded to CODIS, but there have been no matches. This case is a great candidate for genetic genealogy. Interestingly, Twilight was found wearing pants and a men's extra-large blue Edmonson County High School baseball-style shirt with the number 10 on it. While some reports say that the shirt was from a rival team, other reports say the schools weren't exactly rivals. Also, friends recalled she often shopped at thrift stores, and police believe the shirt may have come from there. However, no one reported seeing it before, so it remains possible that it belonged to the killer. However, much like her last hours, that detail remains a mystery. In 2021, authorities obtained a search warrant for a property following a tip that was prompted by local media coverage. Sheriff Hightower requested the FBI's assistance due to the property's size and the need for specialized analysis, including luminol testing. Unfortunately, nothing was found. If you have any information about Twilight's death, text 274-637-CRIMES using SCKY plus your message. Your information could make a difference. A $10,000 reward is available for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the individual responsible for this case. Jessie Marie Twilight Song Crooks was murdered in August 2001, and as of October 2025, this case remains unsolved. Shannon Ramsey Gadd Angel was born on February 4, 1972. At 52, she lived within the city limits of McKee, Kentucky, and while she was married to Brian Angel, it's unclear if they were living together at the time. Shannon was described by family as a very private person who dealt with her own challenges and was deeply devoted to her grandkids, who called her Granny. Sadly, in August of 2024, she strangely went missing. The last time anyone saw her was at her home between August 9th and 12th. She was recovering from a broken ankle, was wearing a cast, and walked with a limp. According to the family, she was last seen in her home on the 12th, but her husband told her sister 2 days later that she'd been missing for 10 whole days. He then contacted her son Stephen on the 23rd and told him the same thing. That's when her family decided to report her missing. The police searched his home and vehicle, but found nothing of evidentiary value. Her son said his mom never leaves without her purse, wallet, and all her little trinkets, like knives and other items, but they were all still at the house. Her food stamp card with her name on it was allegedly found in Brian's possession. According to her sister, Angela, it took 2 months for them to even organize a search, and even then, it was only about a dozen searchers walking in the woods around her house. Shannon had dealt with substance abuse in the past, and her sister believes that's the reason authorities aren't taking her disappearance more seriously. Interestingly, her son, Stephen, captured several photos of this person in a blue car, repeatedly driving by his home, taking photos. It may or may not be related to his mother's disappearance, but it's certainly strange. There are unfortunately few details available in her case. Shannon stood 5 foot 6 inches and weighed about 180 pounds. She had strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes. If anyone has information on Shannon's location or disappearance, they're asked to call Jackson County Dispatch at 606-287-9979. Shannon Ramsey Angel disappeared in August 2024, and as of October 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved.